From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Are you buckled in? Are you ready? Because the first comment of the day from someone by the name of James says, supply chain attacks sound serious. They are, James. They are. But for those who don't know, my name is also James Azar. I'm a Chief Information Security Officer, host of the CyberHub Podcast, episode 913. Ooh, so many. The countdown's starting to get there. All right, so we've got a packed show. We'll talk a lot. We're going to talk about food supply chain. We're going to talk a lot about China. We're going to talk about Ivanti, because what would be a week in cybersecurity without another Ivanti exploit for customers who seem gluten for punishment in ways man cannot understand nor comprehend? At least my brain cannot. So without further ado, we're going to get into this morning's show. A lot to talk about. Got my coffee cup here with a double espresso from Lavazza, which is absolutely magnificent. Coffee cup cheers, y'all. Perfect. Like, I savored that espresso. All right. So ransomware attacks are starting to really pile up against the food industry, and it's a very, very alarming national security threat. Now, none of these are actually taking place in the US. This is primarily happening in Europe, and there's context behind it. So one, if you've missed the show, if it's your first time tuning in, Co-op, a really large food cooperative in the UK, got hit with a ransomware attack last month. They're still recovering. They have empty shelves. Well, now the logistics company Peter Green Chilled, which transports refrigerated goods to some of the largest supermarkets across Europe and in the UK, in supermarkets in Somerset like Aldi, Tesco, and Sainsbury, and many other across the UK, have all received emails as of last week saying that they're unable to process some of their orders due to a cybersecurity incident. BBC News says the attack took place on Wednesday and that it didn't impact the company's transport activities, but it declined to say what IT systems were impacted. And again, this is kind of the crosshair of business, IT, and operations, and kind of how the two come together. And the reason I say that is because you go, well, their trucks don't have any issues operating because, they're not smart semi trucks yet that you can essentially take offline, which might be a case in the future. 10 years from now, we may be doing this show with a cane going, and today, no Volvo autonomous semi trucks could drive because of a cyber attack. Drivers can drive the food, but they can't process the orders because there's that inner complexity of IT and then the actual physical operations of the business. Now, we don't know whether this was a ransomware attack, although it has the kind of markings of a ransomware attack. And what systems were impacted? Could they be an SAP shop and potentially had something happen there? Could it have been like, an unpatched endpoint? We don't know any of those. But James here says, what if they attack their payment system? I'm not sure. Well, no, because they're billing. So you could say their ERP system potentially, or their inventory system. So if they attack the inventory system and now they no longer know where that would happen, then that could be the case. But just deliver the food. Say that to Colonial Pipeline, James. Say that to Colonial Pipeline, and I'll tell you why. So Colonial Pipeline back in 2021 went through a ransomware attack. And the ransomware attack didn't hit their OT system. They could still flow fuel, but it hit their billing system. And so they shut down the pipeline. And that caused gas prices to go through the roof. If you remember, there were lines in the Northeast resembling Jimmy Carter fuel shortage type of stuff. If you're too young to remember that, like me, then you just go to YouTube and watch some videos of the news back then. So the same applies here. It's likely hitting either one of their billing systems, and they're not going to deliver food if they can't bill for it, apparently, or they can't coordinate it. It could be a complex issue there. But that's not the only place. Arla Foods, which is a dairy producer and farm-owned cooperative with 7,600 members, employing 23,000 people in 39 countries with an annual revenue of $13.8 billion, was impacted by a cyber attack when one of their production facilities in Uppal, Germany, had to shut down its entire product operation, resulting in product delays or even some sort of cancellation. They're now confirming, according to an Arla spokesperson, that they identified suspicious activity at their dairy site in Uppal that impacted the local IT network due to safety measures, and a result of that, production was temporarily affected. And it just shows you how essentially we've gone from, like, we've introduced technology to places without introducing security. And it brings about this debate of, should you be selling these types of devices without at least the minimal amount of security on the device in order to keep it running, when you're especially selling to farmers who, I'm not dismissing, farmers are a critical part of our civilization. I have tremendous respect for people who tend to crops, who tend to animals, who make sure that we get good food on our table for our families every single day. This isn't a knock on them, but this is rather a knock on these multi-million or billion-dollar companies that sell products to organizations, and then they don't put enough security controls around these products or train enough people to secure it. And then you have information, and then you have situations like this that ends up saying, instead of giving you all this tech, we're introducing a new risk that didn't exist to your business by introducing this new tech. And I think, folks, that's the question here. The question here remains is, what is the balance between technological improvements to security? And there's got to be a balance there. The Dr. Allen did the S-bomb over at CISA and DHS. Unbelievable work, but we've got to get more teeth in there. And this is one of those. Now, this is all happening in Europe, so it's not happening in our backyard yet, but we know that the guys that went after Harrods and Marks and Spencers and Co-op, the ransomware group, is now targeting US retailers as well. So what happens in the UK ends up in the US, including Revolutions. So so you have that as well. So there's that. But we're not leaving Europe quite yet, because in the UK there's now records confirming that there is the cyber attacks that happened last year. 2 different cyber attacks impacted the National Health Service in the UK last year. Well, it could put patients at risk of clinical harms, according to data obtained by Recorded Future. The data recorded by the government under the Network and Information Systems Regulation and obtained under a FOIA Act, the Freedom of Information Act, doesn't identify specific incident, but highlights a growing threat that financially motivated cyber incidents pose to public safety. And again, it's the chaos, it's the disruption that comes from this, the loss of trust in public institutions due to these cyber attacks that essentially crumbles a society. And it's happening one after the other. So again, as practitioners, when you look at this, you understand how these cyber threat actors are essentially jumping industries, right? And as they jump these industries, then they're starting to introduce these risks, and then these industries have to adopt to it, but they don't have the know-how, right? They just don't have the know-how, because typically they're not corporate heavy. Like in co-ops and in food, they're not corporate heavy. The corporate people could be 3 people all in all that just kind of bring everything together, maybe 10 people. And primarily everyone else is a farmhand. It's working on the production side and so forth. And so what you end up seeing is they lack the IQ, they lack the data needed, and it's not a rich market. So there's no one really going there to help them solve these problems. We see that in now food, but we saw that with water. We're seeing it with water systems all over this country and everywhere else. Well, healthcare is a big one as well. And one of the 2 incidents is likely the ransomware attack that happened on pathology services provider Synovis in the UK, which severely disrupted care at a large number of National Health Service hospitals and care providers in London by delaying and even canceling operations and appointments. So criminals similarly disrupted a case care in an attack on Wirral University's teaching hospital, causing delays to cancer treatments, as reported by the Register. And again, These things matter. It's life and death. And when you do these types of attacks, it's life and death. And it's not really like, I don't know when this bomb is going to drop, because we've seen people die from it, but it's one here, one there, two here. And for most people, they just go about their day, not understanding that we need to take this stuff seriously. Our food chain and our healthcare are the backbone of what gets our economy moving. And if you can't secure those two effectively, you crumble as an economy. So those are those stories there. Now, if you're a person who glutes for punishment, then must be an Ivanti customer. Whenever I see someone tied up walking down the street on a leash, I realize there's an Ivanti customer there. There's one right there. Sorry if you're offended by that. I do apologize. But at what point do you rip and replace? At what point do you just say no? Well, now we see a successful breach of a limited number of Ivanti endpoint mobile manager users by chaining together a medium and high severity vulnerabilities in a suite of their MDM software, mobile device management. The vulnerabilities CVEs 2025-4427 and 4428 would allow an unauthenticated attacker to achieve remote code execution. Ivanti's urging customers to upgrade to a fixed version of the software. I'm urging those customers to leave. I talk about these guys every month, every single month on the show, multiple times a month. Do we talk about Chinese abusing Ivanti? There's not an Ivanti customer that China does not love for them having Ivanti on their network. The company is also warning that the two vulnerabilities are linked to flaws in an open source library that's integrated into the EPMM. So now they're trying to blame it on a third-party flaw. However, researchers at Watchtower said, we're going to call BS. And they said the researchers claimed that Ivanti misused a known dangerous function in the Hibernate validator library that they're trying to blame it on. So they didn't use a dangerous library. They misused that library known for a dangerous function that every developer on the planet knows. Yet Ivanti is like, how do we create more vulnerabilities in our products today? How do we become the unsecurity company? Meanwhile, researchers at Shadow Server Foundation are finding that 798 instances of CVE 4427 were unpatched and considered vulnerable as of Sunday. That's down from 940 on Thursday, so some patching happening there. The exploit chain links the authentication bypass in EPMM that allows an attacker to gain access to a protected resource without proper credentials, and a remote code execution flaw that allows an attacker to execute arbitrary code on a target system. The vulnerabilities, according to them, have a CVSS score of 5.3 and 7.2. Together, they're a perfect 10. That's what I'll give you. They're a perfect 10. So that's the case with Ivanti. Rapid7 tested the proof of concept, confirmed the work, but has not seen any confirmed exploitation in customer environments, according to Ryan Emmons, the security researchers over at Rapid7. The issues were first reported to Ivanti by CERT EU, the security service for the union institutions. There's that there. Threat hunters have exposed the tactics of a China-aligned threat actor called Unsolicited Booker. Love these names. That targeted an unnamed international organization in Saudi Arabia with an undocumented backdoor dubbed Mars Snake. ESET first discovered the group's intrusion, targeting the entity in March of 2023, and again a year later. And why are you seeing what's China's interest in Saudi Arabia? Saudi Arabia has dabbled for years, like most Middle East countries, between the US and China. They've kind of dabbled between the two until last week. President Trump went in and said, you're either all in or you're all out. One of the two. What do you want to do? You want to be on the China side or the US side? Obviously, no need to wonder their response. $5.1 trillion invested in the US between three Middle Eastern countries and a whole bunch of other opportunities opening up there and so forth. And so obviously there's that. The Chinese know that. The Chinese see Saudi Arabia as strategic as part of their Belt and Road Initiative. If they want something to come through Iran, they want it to go through Saudi Arabia to the Mediterranean. Their Belt and Road Initiative extends all the way into the European market. So they see that. According to the latest campaign spotted by ESET, it involves sending phishing emails claiming to be from Saudi Airlines, to the same Saudi Arabian organization about a flight booking. The Word document is attached to the email with decoy content, and it's a flight ticket that was modified but is based on a PDF that was available online on the academia website. The Word document, once launched, triggers the execution of a VBA macro that decodes and writes to the file system an executable that in turn acts as a loader for Snakes, a backdoor that establishes communication with a remote server. We see that there. O2, a large telecom in the UK, actually introduced a vulnerability with their 4G calling and voice over LTE launch recently by essentially having user location information being leaked in network responses. It works by delivering the voice service as data flows, but requires a device, firmware, and mobile network support the technology. Looking to test the quality of the O2's newly launched 4G calling service, UK Networks enthusiast Daniel Williams discovered that messages his phone received from the network contained a lot of information, including his user location. Essentially, William explained anyone capturing the information could then leverage publicly crowdsourced data and discovered a general location of a user. Kind of scary, but not trivial. People would do that. The engineering teams have been working on testing a fix for a number of weeks, and now it's fully implemented, and that shouldn't happen anymore. Security researchers have also uncovered malicious PyPI packages related as a checker tools to validate stolen email addresses against TikTok and Instagram APIs. The 3 packages no longer available were downloaded nearly almost 7,000 times, and there were Checker SAGAF, Steinlerks, and Sinner Core. True to its name, they would check if an account is associated with if an email is associated with a TikTok account and an Instagram account, according to Socket researcher Olivia Brown. And then they were designed to send an HTTP post request there and then a recovery API. So all of those there are in play. Sorry there. My phone needed to be silent. So there's that. We'll continue. For half a year, the website of a printer company called Pro-Colored served software downloads that contained malware, according to G Data. They were tipped off by a tech writer that the USB drive containing the device software was infected with malware. G Data analyzed the software downloads through the company's website only to discover they were infected as well. The tech writer, Cameron Coward, I don't know, has notified the printer firm of the issue only to be told that it was a false positive. G Data, however, discovered that 39 software downloads hosted on mega.nz and last updated in October of 2024 were infected with 2 malware families, namely an information stealer and a backdoor. The backdoor was X-Red, written in Dolphy, and has a worm-like behavior. The sample found in the Pro-Colored downloads could log keystrokes, download additional payloads, take screenshots, tamper with files, and even provide a shell if requested. The stealer, Coin Stealer, targets crypto wallets and can replace crypto addresses in the clipboard when an attacker address to divert funds there as well. And finally, NATO had their Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence in Tallinn, Estonia last week, hosted the 15th edition of Lock Shields that roughly had 4,000 experts from 41 nations taking part in the exercise that went from 4 nations and 60 participants in 2010. So it's really, really grown. The cybersecurity experts who took part in Lock Shields 2025 were tasked in protecting more than 8,000 systems, including military infrastructure and telecom networks, against more than 8,000 cyber attacks, showing you that global cooperation is still somewhat possible. That's it for our show this morning. We'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, live with all the latest and greatest. Until then, make sure to subscribe, follow, share, like, comment. CyberHubPodcast.com is where you'll find all the latest, including this very podcast in written format, paragraphs for every single story, and an actual action list you can take with you for the rest of the day if you need it, or to add it to your Gantt chart or work chart as something to review. So go do that now at CyberHubPodcast.com. Subscribe for absolutely free. Get it in your inbox shortly after the podcast. Until then, have a great rest of your day. Thank you all for tuning in. And most importantly, y'all, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.